everybody. My name is Leanne, and I am one of two program coordinators for NAMI Valley of the Sun, which is the Maricopa County affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I am thrilled this evening to welcome Beth Brady, who works with Solari. And she may correct me, but Solari is the operation that is managing the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And Beth, you'll have to correct me because I think it's nationwide. So we are thrilled to have her joining us and giving us a little introduction about 988. We're going to give a presentation, and then following the presentation, we will do some questions that were submitted during registration. And then if there is further time, we will open it up from the floor for additional questions. So if you think of stuff as we're going along, go ahead and pop a question in the chat, and we will try and get to all the questions as we go along. So welcome again, and thank you to Beth. I will hand it over to you.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Leanne, and hello, everyone. Thanks for taking time on your Wednesday evening to join us and learn a little bit more about what 988 is. I'm sure you've all been hearing rumblings about that it's coming and here, and what does that mean? And so hopefully I can give you a good introduction and share some of the differences between the national 988 number versus what does that mean here locally in Arizona. And as Leanne said, we'll have time for questions at the end. As she said, my name is Beth Brady. I'm the Vice President of Brand and Development for Solari. I've been with the company for about 10 years and actually started my journey with them on the crisis line. So I used to take crisis calls and I'm very familiar with the process and the operations of that. So feel free to ask any questions as they come up. So some of the things that we're going to cover in the presentation, aside from the introduction, are, what are some common reasons for calling? Sometimes when you hear the term suicide and crisis, a hotline or a lifeline, people aren't sure for what reasons can they call. So we'll cover that. We'll also cover what to expect. I think it can be scary to call a lifeline, especially if you don't know what's going to happen after you call. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what the continuum of care is. So what options are there after you call the crisis line? I'm going to review a little bit of data with you so you can see what's happening in Arizona and how many people use the lifeline. And then I'm going to touch briefly on how do I know who to call? Should I contact 211 or 988 or 911? And then just end with some additional resources that you can take with you. So first off, as I said, I'm here representing Solari, and you may or may not have heard of us, but we rebranded last year. And prior to that, we were Crisis Response Network. And we had been the crisis line in Arizona since 2007. So while we have a new name and 988 is new, this is not, these aren't new services to us. And so we recently expanded into Oklahoma as well. And we're the largest operation in the country with our Arizona crisis line, taking almost 25,000 calls per month. So I'm going to share a little video that can, I think, capture a lot better than I can say what happens in our call center. And you'll get to see some of our staff talk about their role in our work as well.
When someone calls or someone reaches the crisis line, we answer right away, 100% of the time, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We work together as a team with the caller, with whoever we're speaking to, regardless if they're calling about themselves or someone else, and provide them with an opportunity for some kind of assistance. But most importantly, we want to be there with the person, and we want to provide them with the opportunity that hope is real and help is out there. Having them trust us enough to be able to be that support and guiding them through that opportunity is really special, really special.
At Solari, we have a strong belief, especially in providing crisis support, to treat individuals with dignity and respect. and support them where they are. And so if we can do everything we can to keep them in the home, to keep them in the community, keep them with their natural supports, their family, their friends, that's really what we're trying to do, is to engage folks as early as possible, give them the supports they need, but whenever possible, keep them supported within the community that they call home. When somebody has a need and comes in a crisis situation, if we're not able to engage them appropriately and get the right handoffs and get the connections to where they need to go, the consequences can be dire.
Solari saves lives because if it wasn't for Solari, how many community members would not be alive today? How many families would have broken up? Solari is there 24/7. How many other organizations do that? What Solari has done for me personally, they were able to give me the resources that I needed, and they saved not only my family member's life, but my life, because that one phone call can make all the difference in the world.
We're absolutely the most advanced crisis contact center in the United States. The things we're learning, the things that we can share, are things that can be trusted. They can be thought of as best practice. If you have a suicidal caller on the phone, we don't want our staff trying to look up insurance information or doing data entry. We want them to be in that moment, taking the phone call with the person and making them safe. 85% of the people that call us, we're able to give them enough support over the phone that we don't have to send out a mobile team, we don't have to send out fire or police. We're building things that are impacting crisis work nationally, and those things are going to be the stepping stone for the development in the future.
What Solari does in the community is very, very valuable because they want to make a difference. They want to save lives.
There is hope out there, and there is a solution, and although we may not have that solution immediately, there's a process and there's a plan and there's supports, and you're not alone.
Anybody who is hurting, anybody who's struggling, or if you know of somebody who is, don't hesitate to reach out for help. Help is here, resources are here, and our team is waiting to make an impact. At Solari, we truly are inspiring hope.
All right, so that gives you just a little bit more insight into what's happening in the call center when you call Solari. And as you're going to learn, there are some differences between 988 and the local lines. So let's get this, there we go. So let's start with 988 and a little bit of the history there. So this has been being talked about really for decades, but it wasn't until 2020 when the FCC finally adopted rules to establish 988 as the national crisis number, and really with the goal to increase parity, equality, and accessing mental health services, just like we access physical health services. So as we all know, 911 has been around for many years. And we also know that you're more likely to experience a mental health challenge than you are a physical health challenge. So another reason why this movement has been so important. And so in 2021, that was when the telephone companies were getting prepared for 988 and issued that you must dial 10 digits for all local calls. And so that transition, a lot of people were like, why do we have to do this? And why do I have to update the numbers in my phone? But that was really for the preparation and infrastructure of 988. And then it's been just about a month. We're 31 days in since 988 has launched nationally. So as Leanne said, this is a national number. However, it's not like Solari is not the only provider of 988 services. There are providers in each state answering those calls that are coming in their local communities. And that's really important to make sure that we are connected with the community, that we know what resources are available, who we're responding to, what the community needs are. And it'd be really hard to provide that on a national level because there are so many cultural differences, not only with each state, but regions within the state as well. So while 988 is being presented as, hey, this is this new exciting launch, it's really an evolution of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with that name and that number. It was the 1-800-273-TALK number. So this is really an evolution of that number. It's, reducing it to 3 digits, but hopefully everyone can remember and know that they have that safety net to reach out to should they need it. And it's really just continuing to build on that infrastructure and resources to support our communities nationwide. We know that lifelines are proven to work. So there have been a lot of studies to show that when you call a lifeline or a hotline or warm line, that people tend to feel less depressed, less suicidal, and more hopeful. I think that's really important. And you heard in the video that the majority of folks that call into our helplines were able to provide enough support and information that that phone call is all it takes in the moment. We're not, needing to schedule any type of emergency intakes. We're not sending police or fire. It's really just about having that person to listen to you. It's not going to, provide it. There's no judgment. It's, hey, what's going on? How can we help problem solve and find resolution for this situation? Or, a lot of times we can't maybe find resolution in one call, but we can help make a plan to get there. I'm going to talk a little bit about data in a bit. One of the things that our CEO is always asking us for is the stories. I think sometimes when we take so many calls a day, people are really impressed by, the 800 calls are being handled a day or 25,000 a month. But really it's about those individual interactions where we can help provide hope to someone. And so this was a quote from a 988 caller that we scheduled a follow-up call because they felt like they were in a good place, but they wanted another check-in just to make sure that they were going to be safe. And so that they expressed on that follow-up call that really helped keep them alive, knowing that they had someone that was concerned about them and was going to call back. So I want to talk a little bit about the national process flow. So if I'm here in Arizona and I dial 988 on my cell phone, I'm going to hear a recording while my call is routed through the national platform. And then as it's routing, I'll hear some hold music and it will be connected to the local Arizona center, which is Solari. At that time, the crisis specialist will talk to me, help problem solve, do a brief assessment and identify ways to help. Now on the next portion here, you're going to see some of the differences between that national number versus local. So on the national side, when you dial 988, you'll be routed by your area code. And that's important to know because a lot of folks move and they might have a sentimental attachment to their previous number. I know when I moved to Arizona from Minnesota, I was like, oh, that's close, near and dear to my heart. So I kept that number probably for 10 years before I ever changed it. And if I would have dialed 988 with my Minnesota number, even though I was in Arizona, I would have been connected to the Minnesota 988 center. And that's important to note for a couple of reasons. Might require a couple more handoffs to get connected to the local center. And also, we do not have geo-targeting or geolocation as an option for 988. I have seen some articles. There's some misinformation about, if you call 988, they're going to know your location and send the police. That we don't have that capability. That's not to say that geolocation will never be a feature of 988, but we're simply not there yet, which is why it's routed by area code. When you dial 988, you're going to hear a recording that says, thank you for calling the National Lifeline. And for 1, press veterans. For veterans, press 1. And for Spanish, press 2. So you'll hear a couple of options. And then, as I mentioned, you'll hear some music while it connects you. If you call the local number, which the local number in Central Arizona is 602-222-9444. and we're moving to a statewide single number this fall, but that routes directly to Solari, and a person will answer generally within 10 seconds. So there's no automated message, there's no routing of the call, it just rings right into our center. Here in Arizona, we do have mobile crisis teams. So if that is necessary or the person requests that, we do have the option to dispatch those teams. Some other states don't have that capability. And I know we're here to talk about Arizona, but I'm sure we all have friends and family in other states. So it's important to know that some of the information I'm sharing tonight could actually be different in other states because there are regional differences, even though it's a national number. The great thing for Arizonans is that Solari is both the provider for Arizona 988 and our statewide crisis line. So no matter what number you call, you're going to get the same team who receives the same training each and every time. So you don't have to worry about any inconsistencies where some states may have different providers for these two services. You might be wondering, well, if 988 is here, why are we bothering with a local number, right? Who's going to remember this 10-digit number? Well, we can just dial 988. And I had a similar thought initially, but the state of Arizona, Access, and the regional behavioral health authorities are really committed to ensuring that Arizonans receive help as soon as possible and are easily connected to our local service provider, which is Solari. And so because 988 is new and we don't have full control over that national network, we want to make sure we keep our local numbers intact so there's no trouble connecting to services. I mentioned that sometimes when you hear 988 suicide and crisis lifeline, you might think this situation has to be dire for me to reach out or for me to suggest that someone reach out. That's simply not the case. We would much rather speak to someone sooner and help prevent a crisis than waiting until it reaches a crisis point where action needs to happen. So these are some common reasons for calling. And someone could be feeling depressed or having maybe a panic attack, maybe going through a breakup or divorce, using substances and are interested in finding resources, maybe for detox or groups, suicidal thoughts, engaging in self-harm. These are some of the most common, but certainly not limited to this. We don't define what a crisis means. That is up to the person who's calling. And so there's really nothing that would rule you out from using a crisis line. We just like to share that these are some of the most common reasons for calling. So if you do make the call, or maybe you're talking to a loved one who needs some additional support and you want to encourage them to use 988, some of the things that you can expect here in Arizona if you connect with Solari are that you should be connected to a person rather quickly. On average, it's 10 seconds. And you'll see a little bit more details when I go over the data. We are going to ask for your name, date of birth, phone number, and that's really for our record. So if we're disconnected, if someone is in a dangerous situation, that we have that information to be able to help. Now, why we will ask for that, if the person prefers to remain anonymous, then they absolutely can, that is their right. And we will still continue to try and help and support them in the best way that we can. Even if you call or have a loved one that calls who's not thinking about suicide, we will ask if you're thinking about suicide because it is still a crisis lifeline. And so we just want to make sure that we're assessing safety. And if the person is not thinking about suicide, and says no, then we'll just proceed with our conversation and find out what their reason for calling is. Any information that's provided is private and confidential. It's just like, it is protected health information. So unless someone's life is at imminent risk, we would never share any of that information. As I mentioned, you can absolutely call before it gets to the point of crisis. We would rather prevent a crisis from occurring than wait until it escalates. And then lastly, I think this is really important. Some people think that you have to call for yourself, and that maybe if you're worried about a loved one or a coworker, it could even be an acquaintance that your hands are tied. But actually you can call and you can request information, you can share information. When I say request information, you couldn't request about the individual you're concerned about, but you could request resources, what tips might we have to help you engage that person? Or we can even do an outreach call and say, hey, we received a call from someone who really cares about you. And is there anything we can do to help? So keep in mind that you can always call as a third party, whether that is a friend, coworker, family member, or maybe even someone that you're working with as a client. Some of the phrases that you might expect to hear, when you call the lifeline, you're going to hear, this is the lifeline, introducing myself, like, this is Beth, how can I help you? Going to ask for a little bit of demographic information, and then really want to know what led you to call us today, because we do recognize that it can be a little bit scary or intimidating to reach out, especially when we're feeling like we're having a hard time and we don't know where else to turn. So our specialists are trained to really be compassionate and empathetic and not provide any judgment, but just help find out what happened, how did we get here, and what can we do to either help resolve the situation or help create a plan and connect you to resources to work towards those next steps. So here's what we call the crisis continuum. And when we're talking about crisis, I think a lot of times people's minds go directly to, if I call in crisis or my loved one calls in crisis, that means you're just going to send the police and things are going to be downhill from there. That is really our last resort. So on this continuum, you have a person in crisis who may call 988. That crisis specialist is going to do everything they can to provide support over the phone. If for some reason that support isn't enough, or the person feels like, this just hasn't helped me as much as I thought, I really would like to speak with someone in person, I'm just not getting enough support, then we can dispatch a mobile crisis team, which are two professionals in mental health. So it's not law enforcement or anything like that. It's folks that will come in an unmarked vehicle, plain clothing, and provide that in-person support. And they can meet with people in their home, in the community, at a McDonald's, on a street corner, wherever the person feels most comfortable. If that still doesn't provide enough support, where the person feels like maybe they don't know if they'll be safe or they don't feel comfortable remaining in their home, then we would look to a crisis facility that might have availability for a short inpatient or assessment or hospital assessment. All of these things are going to be voluntary, so we can't force anyone to have a mobile team. We can't force anyone into a crisis facility without a court order. So all of these things are up to the caller initially, and then at the end there, the post-crisis follow-up, that should really happen whether the person is in a crisis facility, has a mobile team come out, or just calls 988. So we don't do follow-up calls on every single 988 call, but we do offer it as an option. So if the person feels like, this was helpful, but I just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and I'm a little bit nervous about it, could you check in and make sure that I got connected or schedule this appointment with a counselor? We can absolutely do that. And then the other organizations that provide the mobile crisis team and the crisis facilities have their own follow-up programs as well. Just to give you an idea of the crisis call volume, since 988 has launched, there's been a lot of discussion now that the number is so brief and easy to remember. Does that mean there's going to be so many more calls because now there's all this media attention around 988? And we are seeing that to be true. So we launched a week prior to the national launch, and we had just under 700 calls that first week. The national launch, which was the week of week 2 for us, the yellow bar there, we saw a dramatic increase, almost up to 1,000 calls just over that first week. And then we saw it stabilize a little bit further in week 3. I haven't received the updated data for week 4 just yet, but I think we're gonna continue to see a slow progression, but I don't think we'll see anything as dramatic as 300 calls week over week. So we're still learning what that's going to look like after this national attention. Here's the data. There's a lot of stuff here, so I'm going to try to walk you through the main parts of this, and also know that this is on our website. I'll share the link to it later on in the presentation, but you can go to our website at any time and actually see this dashboard live. And it always has the last 30 days of data. So I'll walk you through it, but again, you can always look at this on our website if you want to comb through it or dive a little bit deeper. So this is the numbers that I'm going to walk through are the total numbers for our Central and Northern Arizona crisis lines. When you're on the live dashboard, you can select just Central or just Northern if you want to see them separated out. So here you see the average speed of answer is just under 10 seconds. So that's the time it takes for a caller to reach a Solari staff member. The delay is the amount of time that it takes to speak to a crisis specialist. So we do have a couple different levels of staff. We want to make sure that all of our phone calls are answered by a live person to make sure the person is safe if they need to wait. And if they say no, then that person is prepared to take the call immediately. If they say, yep, I can wait a few more seconds, then on average, they may wait an additional 20 seconds, but still well under a minute and in most cases, it's less than half a minute. Abandonment rate is a long formula. It's a general call center statistic, but it looks at how many people are hanging up before they reach a specialist within a given amount of time. And a national benchmark for that is you want to try to be less than 3%. And you see there we're less than 1%. So that's looking good. Moving over to the second tile, volume. I've already talked that our crisis call volume averages between 20 and 25,000 per month. And you see here the mobile team dispatches for the last 30 days were 2,700, a little bit more. And so you see it's a really dramatic difference that the majority of those calls are being resolved over the phone, with just about 10% requiring a mobile crisis team. In Arizona, we also offer crisis transportation. So for example, let's say I am maybe experiencing a substance use detox symptoms, and I don't need someone to come out and kind of talk to me about it. I just need a ride to a detox facility. We can sign the person up or dispatch them a crisis transportation so they are able to get to that appointment. In the next tile is our first responders. So this, we thought it was important to show because there is a common misconception that if you call the crisis line, that we'll send the police. And we do work really closely with law enforcement because we want to make sure that we're educating law enforcement on that we're the mental health experts, they're the community safety experts. And so if they're ever on scene and determine that someone's experiencing mental health symptoms, we want to be the ones to help the person. And so you see here that fire contacted Solari 120 times in the last 30 days. The police department contacted us almost 800 times, and that's them contacting us asking for help or asking for us to speak to someone who may be having suicidal thoughts, but is in a safe place, or maybe experiencing anxiety or any other mental health symptoms where the person called 911 rather than Solari. And then you see that we contacted first responders 62 times out of over 21,000 calls. So, I can tell you that we would never contact first responders, but that's really our last resort. We want to make sure that we use the least invasive intervention for anyone that's calling for help. We want to do everything that we can as the mental health professionals to help resolve that situation. In the next box, that's just the monthly call volume trend. So you can just get a quick snapshot over the last 6 months of what the overall call volume has been. And then moving on to the second row here, the referral sources. So that's who called. So you see that the number one referral source is self. So that's me calling for myself. But closely behind is a concerned family member, a behavioral health provider, other. You see police here, and on the live dashboard, you can hover and see what these other bubbles are as well. We also show the top 10 reasons for calling, again, as a way to educate the community and also let people know you can call us for a variety of reasons, and you don't have to wait until it's a suicidal crisis. So you see those top reasons there. Next up, some zip codes where we receive a number of calls. So it's the top areas served, broken out by zip code across the state, across the 2 regions that we cover. And then the pie chart is just another way of what happens after calling. So you see here, the majority are stabilized on the phone, dispatch crisis team, and then transportation. So we're talking, mostly here about 988 today, and we talked a little bit about the local line, but I just wanted to give everyone a quick snapshot that we really have a telephonic continuum of care here in Arizona as well. And so for any teens, we have the Teen Lifeline that's available 6 hours a day, and that's teen peers supporting their peers, supervised by a professional. Outside of those hours of 3 to 9, anyone who calls the Teen Lifeline, those calls roll over to Solari. So I want to make sure that if a teen's reaching out for support, that their call doesn't go unanswered. So we take all of those calls outside of their business hours. Next up is the peer support warm line. This is also a Solari service, and certified peer support specialists can provide 24/7 support and information. And you must be 18 to call that line, but it is available 24/7. 211 Arizona is information and referral. And that's really for a variety of health and human services. So these will be more resources such as eviction prevention, affordable housing, food box, maybe getting connected to insurance benefits or employment services. So there's just a whole host of things that 211 Arizona can help with. But it's really more of the resource connection as opposed to personal mental health support, which is what the crisis line would be for. So crisis and suicide prevention support, and also access to mobile teams and transportation. So while I have these listed out as 4 different columns and 4 different numbers, I think that because 3 out of the 4, and even outside of business hours of Teen Lifeline, Solari is providing these services. You don't have to worry about calling the wrong one. There's really no wrong number to call. If you call the warm line and if through that conversation find out, that I think I need more support, maybe a crisis mobile team, the warm line will do a warm handoff to the crisis line to make sure that we can get those services available. And so in that same light, these are kind of broken out that if you or a loved one have a health and human services need, such as utility assistance, employment support, or food box, 211 would be a great place to call. They also have a really great user-friendly website that I'll share the link at the end, that you can kind of go on and search and play around if you're looking for a resource for yourself or someone else, and you can look by location or by the service that's needed. 988 is really for those mental health related crises. I think a lot of times people think if the situation is related to suicide, then it's got to be police. We do not, we wouldn't agree with that. We would say that we can handle pretty much any type of suicidal crisis as long as it's not an imminent risk. So if a person has a plan and the means to carry out the plan and they're home alone, obviously we need to just make sure that we can help promote safety. But any other situation with suicidal thoughts, we want to talk to the person, and we want a mental health professional to be the ones that are having those conversations. And so we would reserve 911 only for emergency services when someone's life is at risk. This is another quote we received from a 988 caller, a first-time caller, which sometimes we don't know if someone's calling for the first time or if they've called umpteen times, but it was really nice to hear that this person was able to start speaking positive messages to themselves and start feeling hopeful again. These are just a few references and resources that I talked about in today's presentation. So 988 is actually federally funded through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. And so I provided a link there if you want to look at more of the national information. I included our Crisis Response Network site, which is specific to the crisis and warm line services. The 211 information site, information and referral site, where you can go on there and identify what resources are available. And then lastly, the Teen Lifeline, if you're interested in more information about that service. And I feel like I have talked plenty by now. So here's my information. Should you have any questions that you don't feel comfortable bringing up today or something comes up later, by all means, you can email me. But I think now we are going to open it up to some additional questions. So we have a pretty small group. So I don't know if you, Leanne, if you want to have people go open up their mics or just put it in the chat, but either one is fine with me.
I would say, like you said, we have a pretty small group. So by all means, we'll open it up either way. The first question that just popped into the chat is, will this presentation be available to us? Yes, I will make every effort in the next 2 days to get this video recorded and edited so I can post it on our website. We definitely want this information out to everybody. And Beth, we're getting a request for the resources page again.
Got it. You should see it now.
Oh, yep, it's up there. Are there any other questions from the floor?
Yes, this is Ralph. I had a question. This question arose today on a different call. I'm in Northeast Arizona and the NAMI chapter responsible for Navajo and Apache County. And I was over in Apache County this morning talking to the mental health provider over there, which is Little Colorado Behavioral Health, now part of Community Bridges buyout. And whereas here in the Apache or in Navajo County, I've had several communications. As a matter of fact, I have another call scheduled tomorrow with ChangePoint. I found that today in this presentation, which was pretty much Amy Devon's presentation, you know who she is for Care First, I believe, Beth. She stopped me short in thinking that ChangePoint, our provider for pills and therapy, et cetera, is not a contracted crisis mobile team provider. And it's all handled by CBI. That stunned me because I've talked to Jeff Oak's people about what they are capable of doing. And they actually have a crisis facility on Penrod, both a long-term psych hospital facility and a 23-hour, and they've got wheels to go out on crisis calls, et cetera. So here I am thinking we're building our 988 program certainly in Navajo County around our local provider. And she's telling me basically they're not the contracted provider. I'm sorry, this is all going to be CBI, and CBI doesn't even have an office in Sholo, our area. So it's somewhat confusing to me. I suspect it has something to do with money, like usual.
Yeah. I think I can speak to some of that. The language contracted provider, right? So we have Access, who's the state Medicaid agency, and then there's the 3 regional behavioral health authorities underneath them. And the regional behavioral health authorities contract with all the providers, not just crisis, all of them. And so they contract, and this kind of ties in with Mike's question in the chat. Those requests for proposals are put out, people respond to them, and then providers are selected and are then deemed the contracted provider. So for example, for Solari, we are the contracted crisis line provider right now for Central and Northern Arizona through the regional behavioral health authorities. And then Involve is the Southern Arizona crisis line. And then come October, that's changing to a single statewide crisis line, which Solari will be the contracted provider. For the crisis mobile teams, Solari is not the provider for those. There are a few different ones. Some of them are Impact, Taros, CBI or Community Bridges, Spectrum, I believe, is another one. And so those are providers that have been contracted to provide that service. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other providers that have the capability or that can, go out for a variety of reasons. However, they're not designated to be a part of that statewide system that's kind of been put into place. So it is complex, but that's my understanding of it.
Thank you, Ralph. Does that help? Does that help answer that question? You might be muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. No, Beth's answer is consistent with what I heard today. It's not necessarily the answer that I want to hear, but that's for a different time and place.
Fair enough.
Understood.
I have a question about, you mentioned, Beth, that people could call for a loved one. If you have a loved one in a different state and you're calling for them, would you call 988 locally, or would you find out who the provider is in their local state and call there?
Well, that's a challenge, because if you call 988 and you have a local number, and you'll likely be routed to Solari. And if you say, I'm calling for, my loved one in Texas, for example, they might say, well, we want to get you to the Texas number. However, if you're just looking for maybe information or tips on, what could I do, or what resources are available, we can probably help you with that, regardless of what, you don't have to be at the local line to get that type of information. But if you're looking for 988 to do an outreach call or something like that, then we'd have to make sure that you got connected to the location where your loved one was, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm also looking through the questions, and I feel like the questions that were submitted during registration, and I feel like most of these questions have been answered throughout the presentation. If there are other questions, I will open the floor now, or if you feel like your question was not answered.
It looks like Jacqueline has her hands up.
Good eyes. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, yeah. So my question was to go with the cell phone. If the phone is registered, because now you have to dial 10 digits to call out. If the phone is registered, so like if I'm in New Mexico and I have a Tucson phone, it's gonna go to Tucson, right? I thought you had.
Mhm.
Yes, it will. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. Thank you.
Yeah. It's in my opinion, it's one of the downfalls of the national network, because it's, people can call for a variety of reasons, but if someone's in an acute crisis, we want to help as soon as possible. So with each handoff or each, transfer, that is certainly not ideal. And it's not, take even the mental health element out of it. It's just frankly not good customer service. So that's definitely something that I hope will continue to evolve now that it is launched. But I think it's important to be transparent about that as you're reaching out or as you're recommending the service to others.
So I raised my hand to do a follow-on to Jacqueline. How long does it take to get that rerouting based upon, the cell phone is from Wyoming or cell phone is from Michigan? A lot of people moved to Arizona with different cell phones like you did.
Yeah.
So about how long? Do we have stats on that?
How long till that will change?
Till it comes back into the Arizona system, basically. How do they find out? Do they ask, where are you calling from?
Yes. So it's actually found out on the phone. It's not able to be found out through the technology platform because it doesn't include geolocation. So it would actually be, that if I still have my Minnesota number, I'm calling the Minnesota centers answering saying, okay, what do you need help with? Where are you calling from? Oh, you're in Arizona. And then, following whatever that center's protocols are from there.
Right. So when you called, the three things that you listed were name, birth date, and telephone number. So far, you don't know that I'm calling from Arizona with an Oklahoma telephone number. So how does it happen, Beth? You see what I'm saying?
So we can see the caller ID come in. Is that what you mean? Like, how do we not know what the number is and why are we asking for it?
No, you see the number come in and it's an area code that is not Arizona. And so your slide presentation said that the three things you asked for is a name, a birth date, and a telephone number. You're already telephone number, but it's the wrong area. I'm calling from Arizona and my telephone number is Ohio, where some of my grandkids live, let's say.
Right.
How do you figure that out?
Yeah, we would still ask for the phone number because we know that not all the time the number that people are calling from is either the best number to reach them at or the appropriate number. But if we see that there's that disconnect, like it's an Oklahoma number in Arizona, we'd want to verify that. And then we would follow up with the question of, are you in Oklahoma? Or are you in Arizona? And if they're in Arizona, then, there's no problem to just document an out-of-state number and continue to help that person. But if, they somehow made it to us and then we found out that we're not the local provider, we would probably assess that situation and then do a warm handoff to their local provider. But that could vary state to state depending on their policies.
Yeah, but you guys at Solari, I think, are fantastic. So you're going to do it right.
Well, thank you.
So, but in essence, what you're telling me is that the person at Solari that takes the call is also going to explore, not just a telephone number for follow-up, but where are you is going to be part of it. So that might be a clarification for your slide.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that I wasn't meant to be an exhaustive list, but I think some people think that the numbers is just anonymous and they're caught off guard when we start asking for that personal information. So that's why I sprinkled in a couple, but you're absolutely right. We'll ask a lot more questions than those three. So.
you're building a relationship with the person that's calling, and that's very important in the behavioral health area.
Yeah.
Thank you for your questions, Ralph. Julie, I
Good
see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm a high school counselor and I would like to use this presentation for a staff meeting. Would that be okay? Do I have permission to do that?
Yeah, I can share. I'll share the PDF version with Leanne, and then Leanne, feel free to send it out to the group.
Okay, go. And then I meet with our district counselors, and I'm on the state board for Association for School Counselors.
Great.
So I'd like to share this. We're having a board meeting this weekend, actually. So I'd really like to share it and make sure that it's shared within all the schools in Arizona.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Julie, are you
And
looking?
we're happy. I'm happy to do this presentation again if you feel like there's going to be specific questions. We just did it for Chandler School District as well, so happy to do that.
Okay, I'll get your contact info and I'll share it at my board meeting and see where we go with that.
Okay,
Cool,
sounds good.
thanks.
Julie, are you looking to have the video edited and ready for that too, or just the slides?
Just the slides are fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
Wonderful. All right, one last question. Thank you for taking time to do this presentation. I am the mental health liaison for Local Celebrate Recovery, and this is very important information. Thank you, Marge, for sharing. And thank you for the work you thank you to everybody. I know most people on this call and everybody I know on this call works really hard to make the mental health world better. So without further ado, if there are no further questions, I will go ahead and close this out for tonight and give Beth a huge round of applause and a thank you for joining us tonight. Very appreciative to you for giving up your Wednesday evening.
No problem.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Leanne. Thank you.